Everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So in the past year, I undertook the heavy task of trying to learn game development and what it's about. And this has left me with a very big appreciation of the process of developing video games. In fact, it's very hard for me to criticize a game in a negative light if it's finished and released, because that's, I've been able to kind of see what the process entails. I've even found myself in positions where I have been mentally drained from just the learning process that I cannot imagine how and why anybody would think to make a video game. So it's a special kind of person that gets into the process of video game making, and it takes really special kind of people to be able to deliver multiple video game titles, or at least work in the industry long enough to see multiple video game titles come out from underneath their supervision, or maybe they participated in the process. So it's a very painstaking task. So what does this have to do with today's video? Well, today's video, I titled it Ready to Play But Not Ready to Release, along the lines of that. That's what I wanted my title to kind of convey. And that's because I strongly believe that Gotham Knights is in a place where it is ready to play, but not ready to release. Now, what that means, I'll try my best to explain in different aspects. So the very first thing that I want to make sure that I put here in perspective is I'm not saying that the game is buggy or broken or whatever. No. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to kind of chart out the process of what I've seen other game developers do in terms of building their game, and then try to see if I can, lay it side by side with what Gotham Knights, I think Gotham Knights has been doing, because this is usually what we, see in industry, happenings and how the industry standard goes. Plus, add the fact that the game director or the creative director of Gotham Knights came from Ubisoft under the, workings of the Splinter Cell games. You can almost say, well, perhaps there is some level of that industry standard that is in Ubisoft and the way they pump out their games that is probably being implemented in Gotham Knights. So I took some time to watch a few documentaries on the development of EA and Respawn's Star Wars Jedi Republic. I watched a 1 hour plus documentary on the development of that game. I also took some time, which I've actually watched twice, the development of God of War 2018, and I learned something very important. You see, in the beginning and the onset of a game and its development, especially a game of the AAA scale, what developers do is the narrative team usually takes the lead on how that game will more than likely run in terms of its course. The development teams, the world teams, and all the others, yes, they kind of get pretty much all of the basics of what the game is going to entail, so they start creating systems that will align with it. Animators, 3D modelers, and artists, they start creating models for the character, art, and all of these things. This is a rough sketch of how I think the development process works. So just see if I can construct something coherent for you. And then the narrative team, who writes basically the story, eventually starts to take the front lead on how the game is going to pretty much flow from a narrative perspective. And they're not just doing this in isolation, they're actually coordinating with other teams who have their leaders also driving and following that process. Because the narrative team may be telling a story, but the gameplay team also has to understand how this is going to work from a gameplay perspective as well. So it's this fluid process where everybody is working almost in tandem. But when I say the narrative team is driving things, I got to see the way the Jedi Fallen Order narrative team really stayed ahead of things. And the reason they did that is because whenever they write their story and they write their dialogue, these dialogues have to actually go and be acted out in mocap studios with their actors and their voice actors. So this was one of the reasons you got to see that actually happen. And the narrative team in that documentary mentioned that. So the narrative team basically was kind of in charge, working hand in hand with the mocap team and the technical team that was capturing all of that footage and all of those movements to basically put on the character. And their job was to make sure that they had all of that stuff taken care of in due time. So here's what I think. What we saw last year at the DC Fandom event kind of tells me that the narrative team had already done a lot of the groundwork in order to set the frame of the game so that they could basically build basically what makes up the entire framework of the game. And then now it's filling up plot holes, because even after the DC Fandom event, they went ahead and hired another writer as well to the team. And so it doesn't mean like all of the writing is done. It just means that the narrative team has already taken the steps to frame the story, to frame the universe, to frame what elements they're going to be putting in the game. And the gameplay team has also in tandem followed that and developed what's necessary to allow the game flow from a gameplay perspective. What's the proof of all of this? Patrick Redding himself. In the first gameplay trailer, remember his words, right? He said, this is a mission that's somewhere about a dozen or so hours into Batgirl's story progression. So they already have that taken care of, if you understand what I mean. So when you kind of chart this process, you get to see that the development of this game has reached a point where the game is actually playable in a sense, in my mind. So even if it's just sections of the game, I think that's already a thing that's available for somebody to be able to pick up a controller and play a build or a version of it. So a build would be maybe a portion or be a segment of the game, and then that's something that somebody can play, or there are segments of the game that are available right now within the studio that are being tested, optimized, and being taken care of. So that is what I think, and this is my opinion. What even helped me to solidify this opinion more than anything else, because like I said, it's an opinion and it's all about theory, is what they even showed at the DC Fandom event. It was short, succinct, but it was actually very important. They got to show Batgirl using some of her other abilities as well as Nightwing, and it was actually rendered in a very interesting, high quality way, but it was, in my opinion, a lot of gameplay elemental assets and even elemental actions. So some of the scenes that we've seen show us that the game has aspects of it that is already done, that already seems like it's playable, because if you even watch the gameplay reveal, you'll see that it had a controller and controller commands on there. In fact, what was even interesting, folks, is it did have a PlayStation button command in opening a door. So that was actually even more interesting, because you could say they were trying to maybe capture the gameplay from a PC, but I don't think that's the case. I think this was more than likely played on a PlayStation console, be it a full PlayStation console or a development kit, which is also a PlayStation console but used for developers. So this is where I think that the game is in a playable state. Now, to answer the question, is it ready to be released? The answer is obviously no. I mean, what would be necessary for this game to release? Well, that would depend on the timeline that they are in the production process. So in watching the God of War documentary, I saw that these studios actually have producers who their job is to follow the timelines that have been set. If things go right and if bugs are not in the game, or if there are bugs in the game, their job is to try and at least ensure that the game is in a playable state, or there's a playable build that can meet those deadlines. Once those playable builds can meet the deadlines, then marketing and all of the other advertising takes it from there and runs with it. It's like a relay. Team A, or the set of people that are working on the first phase, when they finish, they relay the baton to the next team, and the next team runs with it. But there is a deadline that the marketing team basically takes on, and then their job is to start to put out the marketing material. So right now, we're starting to see a lot more marketing. I think marketing is gaining basically the confidence, or in the theoretical sense or the analogical sense, they're taking that baton and they're about to start running with it while the game is getting its completion done. Please keep in mind, this game is more than likely going to be releasing on about 9 different platforms. Everything from the last gen, when you count it all: Xbox One, PS4, PS4 Pro, Xbox One X, Xbox One S, Xbox One Series X, yada, 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 PS5, all of the above consoles, even possibly Stadia and Amazon's platform. That would add even more complexity to it, because you have to optimize on all these forms and all these different platforms. Then I think you see where tying that end piece is probably what they're going to be doing for the next 6 to 8 months. In game development world, what I've seen a lot of developers say whenever games are delayed, because I follow a lot of developers on Twitter, and whenever there's a delay, people usually have a weird negative reaction, and sometimes they come in and provide a little voice of reason by saying, hey, one thing that we've learned is even 20 days of extra development time is a big deal, especially in today's world, where they can actually have a game go gold and deploy patches and fixes for critical issues that need to be fixed. So I think Gotham Knights right now is somewhere in between that playable and publishable state. Now, that timeline is also a big timeline. I'm giving it a 6 to 8 month time window. It could be shorter, but that's where I think the game is right now from a lot of the elements that we've seen. I'll get off your hair. Let me know what you think about the video. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and talk to you soon. Peace out.